What ordinary things are actually much more dangerous than they seem? Story 1. I bought this cheap bathroom cleaner. You know, the kind with a bright orange label that screams, kills 99.9% of bacteria. It seemed harmless enough. I didn't bother reading the fine print, because who actually does that? Big mistake. A few days later, I decided it was time for a deep clean. Armed with my trusty sponge and a bottle of bleach, because everything needs a little extra sparkle, I got to work. The first spray of cleaner worked great. Sink? Sparkling. Shower? Perfect. Then I thought, why not combine it with bleach? A little extra power never hurt anyone, right? Wrong. The second the two mixed, my bathroom turned into a chemistry experiment gone horribly wrong. A cloud of toxic gas started forming, and my throat immediately felt like I'd swallowed a blowtorch. My eyes burned, my nose was on fire, and I couldn't breathe. I staggered out of the bathroom, coughing like a chain smoker who just ran a marathon. After fumbling for my phone, I googled bathroom cleaner and bleach reaction. First result, never mix cleaning products. Can produce deadly chlorine gas. Deadly? I ran back into the bathroom, holding my breath like that would help, and threw open the window. I stayed outside for an hour while my bathroom aired out, praying I hadn't just poisoned myself or set my house on fire. Lesson learned. Never assume you're smarter than the warning labels. Now every time I clean, I read the back of the bottle like my life depends on it. Because it actually might. Story 2. I once got locked in a public restroom for 3 hours. Sounds impossible, right? Let me explain. I was at this gas station on a road trip, and let's just say, nature called urgently. The restroom was single occupancy, with one of those old locks that looks like it's been there since the 1970s. I turned the latch, did my business, and then, nothing. The lock wouldn't budge. I jiggled it, kicked the door, even tried to unscrew the handle with a nail file from my bag. Nothing worked. I yelled for help, but either no one heard me or they didn't care. My phone? Dead, of course. So there I was, stuck in this tiny, grimy restroom with nothing but my thoughts and the sound of the broken ceiling fan buzzing above me. After about an hour, I started panicking. What if I never got out? What if the gas station closed and I was stuck there overnight? Finally, I heard someone walk past. I screamed like a banshee, and they stopped. "Are you okay?" they asked. "No, I'm locked in!" I yelled back. Turns out it was a truck driver who'd stopped for a quick break. He got the manager, who then needed a crowbar to pry the door open. By the time I got out, I was sweaty, humiliated, and very, very done with that road trip. Story 3. I used to think ceiling fans were just a harmless household appliance. That is, until the day mine nearly decapitated me. I was rearranging my bedroom furniture, and I'd just bought a new bed frame, one of those fancy ones that lifts the mattress higher off the ground. I didn't think twice about the height difference. That night, I climbed into bed, stretched my arms up to adjust the pillows, and bam! The spinning blades of the fan smacked into my hand. I screamed loud enough to scare my neighbor's dog. Blood was everywhere, and my fingers felt like they'd been run over by a lawnmower. After wrapping my hand in a towel, I headed to the emergency room, where the nurse kindly informed me that ceiling fans cause thousands of injuries a year. Apparently, people forget they're not supposed to reach up when the fan is on. Now, my fan stays off 24/7. I don't care if it's 100 degrees outside. I'd rather sweat than risk losing a limb to that death machine again. Story 4. I thought vending machines were pretty harmless until one tried to kill me. It was during finals week in college, and I was running on 3 hours of sleep and a questionable amount of energy drinks. I desperately needed a snack, so I went to the vending machine in the library. I inserted my dollar, pressed B4, and waited for the chips to drop. But of course, they got stuck. In my sleep-deprived state, I decided the only logical solution was to shake the machine. I grabbed the sides and gave it a good shove. Big mistake. The entire thing started tipping forward. I jumped back just in time to avoid getting flattened, but it was close enough that I could feel the breeze as it slammed back onto the floor. The crash was so loud that half the library came running. The worst part? The chips were still stuck. And now I was banned from the library vending machines for reckless behavior. Lesson learned, Never fight a vending machine. You will lose. Story 5. One time I underestimated the danger of candles. It was a cozy Friday night, and I decided to set the mood with some scented candles while I binge-watched my favorite show. I lit 3 of them, placed them around the room, and got comfortable. About an hour later, I smelled something odd. It wasn't the lavender I'd been enjoying. It was more like burning plastic. I looked up and realized, to my horror, that one of the candles had melted the side of my TV stand. I panicked and grabbed the closest thing to put it out. A glass of water. Bad move. The sudden splash made the melted wax splatter everywhere, including my arm, which now felt like it was on fire. I managed to extinguish the flames and spent the rest of the night cleaning hardened wax off every surface in the room. Moral of the story? Candles may look innocent, but they will burn your house down if you're not careful. Now I stick to LED candles. Less ambiance, but much safer. Story 6. I thought grocery store freezers were harmless. Turns out, they're more dangerous than they look. One time, I was in the frozen food aisle, reaching for a bag of peas buried at the very back. You know the move? Open the door, lean halfway in, and stretch as far as possible without toppling over. I was so focused on my mission that I didn't realize the door had started to swing shut. Before I could react, the edge of the glass door smacked right into my temple. I stumbled backward, dazed, and knocked into a display of canned soup. The whole thing toppled over, sending cans rolling everywhere. To make matters worse, one of the store employees ran over to check if I was okay, and in my panic, I stepped on a stray can, slipped, and landed flat on my back. By the time I got up, my head was pounding, my ankle was twisted, and I was mortified. Now, every time I walk past the frozen section, I grab whatever's closest to the front. Those peas can stay buried for all I care. Story 7. I used to think leaf blowers were just annoying, but harmless. That was until one turned on me. It was a sunny Saturday morning, and I was helping my dad clean the yard. He handed me the leaf blower, saying, "It's easy. Just point and press." I took it, feeling pretty confident, and aimed it at the pile of leaves. What I didn't realize was that the nozzle was clogged with dirt. When I turned it on, it blasted a cloud of dust and debris straight into my face. I started coughing and flailing, and in my panic, I accidentally swung the leaf blower upward. It caught a low-hanging branch, which snapped off and hit me right on the shoulder. As if that wasn't enough, the vibrations from the blower made me lose my grip, and the machine tumbled to the ground, still running. It spun in circles like a possessed vacuum cleaner, scattering leaves everywhere. My dad stood there laughing so hard he couldn't even help. Let's just say I retired from yard work after that. Story 8. Have you ever underestimated how dangerous a hammock can be? Because I sure did. A couple of summers ago, I decided to set up a hammock in my backyard. It looked easy enough. Tie it between 2 trees, hop in, and relax. Except I forgot to actually check if the trees were sturdy. The moment I sat down, the first rope snapped, sending me tumbling backward into a thorn bush. But that's not even the worst part. As I tried to untangle myself, I grabbed onto one of the trees for support. Turns out it was rotten, and the whole thing started to tip over. I barely managed to roll out of the way before it came crashing down. By the end of it, I was covered in scratches, my pride was shattered, and I had a new rule. Never trust a hammock. Now I stick to lawn chairs, less adventurous, but at least they don't fight back. Story 9. One time, I almost got knocked out by a bottle of soda. It sounds ridiculous, I know, but hear me out. It was a hot day, and I just bought a 2-liter bottle of cola from the store. When I got home, I put it in the fridge and completely forgot about it for hours. Later that evening, I decided to crack it open. The second I twisted the cap, the bottle exploded like a fire hydrant. Soda shot straight up to the ceiling, drenching me, the walls, and the kitchen floor. Then, as if it wasn't bad enough, the bottle itself rocketed out of my hands and hit me square in the chin. I ended up with a sticky kitchen, a bruised ego, and a lump the size of a golf ball on my face. Now, I always open soda bottles with one hand on the cap and the other holding the bottle in a death grip. You never know when they'll attack. Story 10. Escalators seem like one of the safest things in the world. I mean, they're basically moving stairs, right? but they can turn on you in an instant. I was at the mall, holding a shopping bag in one hand and my phone in the other. I stepped onto the escalator, not paying much attention, when my shoelace got caught in the gap between two steps. At first, I didn't notice, but as the escalator kept moving, my shoe started getting pulled into the machinery. I panicked and tried to yank it free, but the lace was stuck tight. By the time I reached the top, the entire shoe was gone, shredded into oblivion. The worst part? I was left standing there in one sock, with a crowd of people behind me trying not to laugh. I had to limp through the mall, buy a new pair of shoes, and endure the cashier's judgmental smirk. Let's just say I double knot my laces every time I see an escalator now. Story 11. I never thought a swing set could be dangerous. Turns out I was wrong. One summer, my friends and I decided to relive our childhood by visiting the park. Everything seemed innocent enough until someone dared me to do the loop. Swing high enough to flip over the top bar. Now, I'm not usually one to back down from a challenge, so I hopped on and started pumping my legs like I was training for the Olympics. At first it was fun, wind in my hair, the thrill of going higher and higher. But then I hit that critical height where things went wrong. Instead of flipping over, the swing jerked violently, and I lost my grip. The next thing I knew, I was airborne. I landed flat on my back in the dirt, knocking the wind out of me and leaving me staring at the sky, wondering if I was dead. My friends. Oh, they were no help. They were too busy laughing to check if I was okay. I walked away with a bruised ego, a sore back, and a newfound respect for playground equipment. Lesson learned. Leave the stunts to the professionals. Story 12. One time I almost got taken out by a bird feeder. Yes, a bird feeder. It was a breezy spring afternoon, and I decided to refill the feeder in my backyard. It's one of those hanging ones that you pull down with a cord. I was halfway through pouring the birdseed when a sudden gust of wind caught the feeder, snapping the cord loose. The heavy metal feeder swung back like a wrecking ball and smacked me square in the forehead. I saw stars. The birdseed spilled everywhere, and the feeder dangled mockingly above me as I sat on the ground, holding my head. To add insult to injury, a squirrel scurried over and started eating the spilled seeds like nothing had happened. Now, every time I refill the feeder, I wear a helmet. Laugh all you want, but at least I'm not getting KO'd by backyard wildlife again. Story 13. I once got stuck in a revolving door. Sounds impossible, right? Let me explain. It was a crowded afternoon at a downtown mall, and I was rushing to meet a friend. The entrance had one of those big, fancy revolving doors, and I thought I could slip through quickly. I stepped in, but the person behind me must have pushed too hard, because the door spun faster than I expected. Before I knew it, I was wedged between the glass panels, unable to move forward or backward. To make things worse, the door jammed, trapping me in this glass coffin while everyone else stared. A security guard eventually had to stop the entire mechanism and pry me out. By the time I got free, my face was bright red, and I was ready to swear off malls forever. Now, I take the side door every single time. Less glamorous, but way less humiliating. Story 14. Have you ever been attacked by your own laundry? Because I have. It started when I bought one of those fancy detergent pods. They look harmless, right? Little colorful pillows of cleanliness. Well, I grabbed one to toss into the washing machine, and it slipped out of my hand. The pod hit the edge of the drum and exploded, right into my face. The detergent got in my eyes, up my nose, and even in my mouth. It burned like crazy, and I stumbled around blindly, trying to find a towel. By the time I rinsed my face, my skin felt like I'd just scrubbed it with sandpaper. To make matters worse, my roommate walked in, saw the mess, and asked, "Did you lose a fight with the washing machine?" Now I use liquid detergent like a normal person. Those pods might be convenient, but they're also weapons of mass destruction. Story 15. I never thought a fish could ruin my day, but that's exactly what happened. I was at a family barbecue by the lake, and my cousin convinced me to go fishing. I'm not much of an outdoorsy person, but I figured, how hard could it be? I cast the line, waited patiently, and to my surprise, I actually caught something. The fish wasn't huge, but it was flopping around like crazy. As I tried to unhook it, it slipped out of my hands and smacked me right in the face. That wasn't the worst part. The slimy thing managed to slap my cheek so hard it left a red mark, and in my panic I dropped the rod into the lake. My cousin thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen, and now every family gathering includes some joke about the one that got away. Let's just say my fishing days are officially over. Story 16. One time I learned the hard way that treadmills are not to be underestimated. I was at the gym, feeling overly confident after watching a few fitness influencers on social media. I decided it was time to try one of their sprint intervals. I cranked the speed to a level that was definitely out of my league and started running like my life depended on it. At first, it felt great, like I was in one of those slow-motion sports montages. But then I got distracted by the TV above the treadmill. Just as I turned my head to look, my foot slipped and I lost my rhythm. The treadmill showed no mercy. It launched me backward like a human slingshot, and I landed in a heap on the floor. To make matters worse, the person on the treadmill next to me paused their run just to ask, "Are you okay?" I muttered something about being fine, but my pride was shattered. Now, whenever I use a treadmill, I stick to a manageable pace and avoid making eye contact with anyone in the gym. Story 17. I never thought opening a jar could turn into a life-threatening event. But here we are. It was a quiet evening, and I was making spaghetti for dinner. Everything was going smoothly until I tried to open a jar of marinara sauce. The lid was stuck tighter than a bank vault, and after several failed attempts, I decided to use brute force. I grabbed the butter knife to gently pry the lid open. Bad idea. The knife slipped, and I ended up stabbing the palm of my hand. Blood everywhere. I panicked, wrapped my hand in a towel, and Googled how to stop bleeding from a knife wound. I eventually managed to stop the bleeding, but the worst part? The jar was still unopened. These days, I use one of those rubber jar openers. They might not be fancy, but at least I don't need a first aid kit every time I make pasta. Story 18. Elevators are supposed to make life easier, right? Well, not when they decide to trap you inside. I was at work, running late for a meeting, and I dashed into the elevator just as the doors were closing. I hit the button for my floor, but instead of moving, the elevator jerked violently and then stopped. The lights flickered, and then everything went silent. I was stuck. My phone had no signal, and the emergency button only gave me a crackly voice saying, "Help will arrive shortly." Shortly, my foot. I ended up spending 2 hours in that tiny metal box, sweating and trying not to panic. By the time they got the elevator working again, I was a mess. Sweaty, disheveled, and late to the meeting. Now, I take the stairs whenever I can. Sure, it's more work, but at least stairs don't randomly hold you hostage. Story 19. I once had a near-death experience with a paper shredder. It sounds ridiculous, but let me explain. I was cleaning out old files at home and decided to shred some documents. Everything was going smoothly until I got a little too ambitious and tried to feed in a stack of papers that was clearly too thick. The shredder jammed, and I figured I could fix it by pulling the papers out. Bad move. As I yanked on the papers, my sleeve got caught in the machine. Panic set in as the shredder started pulling in my shirt. I scrambled to unplug it just in time, but not before ruining my favorite sweater and nearly giving myself a heart attack. Now, I'm extra cautious around shredders. One sheet at a time, and I keep my sleeves rolled up. I've had enough drama from office supplies to last a lifetime. Story 20. I thought a simple walk in the park would be relaxing. Turns out I was wrong. It was a beautiful day, and I decided to take a stroll to clear my head. Everything was great until I spotted a goose standing on the path ahead. It looked harmless enough, so I kept walking. Big mistake. As I got closer, the goose puffed up like an angry balloon and started hissing. Before I could react, it charged at me like a feathered linebacker. I turned and ran, but the goose was relentless. It chased me all the way to the parking lot, honking and flapping its wings like it had something to prove. By the time I got to my car, I was out of breath and thoroughly humiliated. The goose stood there, glaring at me as if to say, "This is my park now." Let's just say I stick to indoor workouts these days. Parks are great, but not when they're run by territorial geese. Story 21. One day, I learned the hard way that garden hoses can be weapons of mass humiliation. It was a warm afternoon, and I decided to wash my car in the driveway. I hooked up the hose, turned the nozzle to the jet setting, and got to work. Everything was going smoothly until I noticed a kink in the hose cutting off the water flow. Like any reasonable person, I walked over to straighten it out. What I didn't realize was that the nozzle was still pointed at my face. The second I untangled the hose, a powerful jet of ice-cold water blasted me square in the mouth. I stumbled backward, dropped the hose, and managed to spray myself again before finally shutting it off. To make matters worse, my neighbor witnessed the entire scene and gave me a sarcastic thumbs up. Now, every time I wash my car, I triple-check the hose's direction. I might still get soaked, but at least it won't be in the face. Story 22. I once had a life-altering experience with a toaster. It was early morning, and I was half asleep while making breakfast. I popped a couple of slices of bread into the toaster and waited. When the bread didn't pop up after what felt like forever, I grabbed a fork to investigate. The second the fork touched the inside of the toaster, there was a loud zap, and sparks flew everywhere. I jumped back, heart pounding, convinced I'd just fried the entire kitchen, or myself. Thankfully, the toaster survived, but my fork had scorch marks, and I learned an important lesson about metal and electricity. These days, I use tongs for any toaster emergencies. I might be groggy in the morning, but I'm not risking a reenactment of my own personal toaster horror story. Story 23. I underestimated how dangerous flip-flops could be. It was a casual summer day, and I was wearing my favorite pair while running errands. I was carrying groceries to my car when one of the flip-flops decided to betray me. The sole caught on the edge of the curb, and before I knew it, I was face-planting onto the pavement. My bags went flying, eggs cracked, and a loaf of bread landed in a puddle. To top it off, a group of teenagers nearby started laughing like it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. I limped back to my car with scraped knees, a bruised ego, and a newfound hatred for flimsy footwear. Now, I save flip-flops for the beach. Grocery store runs deserve sturdier shoes and fewer public wipeouts. Story 24. I learned that inflatable pools are not as harmless as they seem. Last summer, I decided to set one up in my backyard to cool off. It took hours to inflate, fill with water, and arrange just right. When it was finally ready, I decided to do a dramatic cannonball into the middle. What I didn't realize was that I'd overfilled the pool. The second I jumped in, water gushed over the edges and flooded the entire yard. Worse, the force of my jump caused the pool to collapse on one side, sending me tumbling out onto the grass like a soaked cat. My neighbors, who'd been enjoying a quiet barbecue, got front row seats to the chaos. The look on their faces said it all. What were you thinking? Now, I stick to sitting calmly in the pool. No cannonballs, no chaos, just a safer, drier experience. Story 25. I never thought a frisbee could cause so much trouble. I was at a park with some friends, casually tossing one around. At some point, my friend decided to show off and threw the frisbee as hard as he could. It sailed beautifully, right into a tree. Being the problem solver I am, I decided to climb the tree to retrieve it. Halfway up, I realized I'd made a grave mistake. The branch I was standing on cracked ominously, and before I could react, it snapped completely. I fell about 6 feet, landing in a bush that, of course, was full of thorns. To make matters worse, the frisbee? It fell out of the tree while I was midair, landing safely on the ground. My friends spent the rest of the afternoon laughing, and I spent it picking thorns out of my arms. Let's just say I don't volunteer for frisbee rescues anymore. Story 26. One winter, I discovered the hidden dangers of icicles. It had been snowing for days, and the eaves of my roof were lined with long, shiny icicles. They looked beautiful, but also slightly menacing. As I was leaving the house, I noticed one particularly large icicle hanging right over the front door. Thinking I'd do the responsible thing, I grabbed a broom to knock it down. The first few swipes missed, but on the third try, I hit it dead on. Unfortunately, instead of falling straight down, the icicle shattered into a shower of razor-sharp fragments. One of them grazed my cheek, leaving a thin, red scratch. Startled, I stumbled backward and slipped on a patch of ice, landing flat on my back. By the time I got up, I was cold, bruised, and seriously rethinking my DIY home maintenance strategy. Now, I just let the icicles melt naturally. Less risk of an accidental fencing match with frozen spears. Story 33. I once had an intense standoff with a can of whipped cream. It was late at night, and I was craving a bowl of strawberries and cream. I grabbed the can from the fridge, shook it like the instructions said, and pressed the nozzle. Nothing came out. Frustrated, I shook it harder and tried again. Still nothing. Finally, I decided to squeeze with all my might. The nozzle popped off, and whipped cream shot out like a fire hose, covering my shirt, face, and half the kitchen counter. I stood there dripping in cream, wondering how my life had come to this. To top it off, my roommate walked in, took one look at the mess, and said, "You need to stop fighting with inanimate objects." I haven't touched whipped cream since. It's just not worth the risk. Story 34. Have you ever been attacked by your own luggage? Because I have. It was during a trip to the airport, and I was running late. My suitcase had one of those extendable handles that lets you roll it behind you. As I was rushing through the terminal, the handle decided to collapse without warning. The suitcase tipped forward, throwing me off balance. In my effort to grab it, I tripped over my own feet and went sprawling onto the floor. My carry-on bag slid across the polished floor like a hockey puck, and my boarding pass fluttered away like confetti. To make things worse, an elderly couple nearby asked, "Do you need help, sweetheart?" I mumbled something about being fine and scrambled to gather my things. Now, I triple-check my suitcase handle before every trip. Flying is stressful enough without your luggage staging a rebellion. Story 35. I'll never look at bubble wrap the same way again. It all started when I got a package in the mail. After unpacking the box, I noticed a giant sheet of bubble wrap and decided to pop a few bubbles for fun. The first couple of pops were satisfying. But then I got ambitious and twisted the entire sheet to pop multiple bubbles at once. Bad idea. One of the bubbles burst with such force that it sent a sharp fragment of plastic flying into my finger. It was just a tiny cut, but it stung like crazy. And of course my roommate saw the whole thing and said, "Injured by bubble wrap? That's a new one." Now, whenever I see bubble wrap, I pop it with caution. Or just let someone else have the fun. Story 36. I never thought a blender could be my mortal enemy. But here we are. One morning, I decided to make a smoothie. Simple enough, right? I threw in some fruit, yogurt, and ice cubes, then pressed the blend button. Nothing happened. Thinking it was jammed, I reached in to reposition the contents with a spoon. What I didn't realize was that the button had a slight delay. As soon as I pulled the spoon out, the blender roared to life, sending a pink explosion of smoothie all over my kitchen. It was on the walls, the ceiling, and worst of all, me. My hair looked like a strawberry milkshake. To make matters worse, my roommate walked in just in time to see me standing there, dripping smoothie and holding the spoon like it was a crime scene. Now, I double-check the lid and keep my hands far away from the blender. Smoothies are great, but they're not worth redecorating your kitchen. Story 37. One day, I discovered that ironing can be a surprisingly dangerous sport. I was getting ready for a big interview and decided to iron my shirt to make a good impression. As I was pressing out the last wrinkle, the iron slipped out of my hand and landed, hot side down, on the carpet. Panic set in as I scrambled to grab it, but in my haste, I managed to burn my hand. The iron also left a perfectly rectangular scorch mark on the carpet, and the smell of burnt fabric filled the room. I still made it to the interview, but with a bandaged hand and the lingering worry that I'd set my apartment on fire. Now, I use a wrinkle release spray. It might not be as effective, but at least it won't give me second-degree burns. Story 38. Once, I almost drowned in a kiddie pool. It sounds ridiculous, but hear me out. It was a summer family gathering, and my niece dared me to slide into the tiny inflatable pool head first. Being the fun uncle, I accepted the challenge. I launched myself onto the slide, only to realize mid-air that the pool was half empty. I landed with a loud splash, and the little bit of water left in the pool surged over the sides. As I tried to get up, the slippery plastic sent me tumbling back down, face first into the remaining water. By the time I regained my footing, I was soaked, bruised, and laughing hysterically, along with everyone else. Let's just say I've retired from kiddie pool antics. They might be small, but they pack a punch. Story 39. You'd think light bulbs are pretty straightforward, right? Well, not when you're me. One day, the bulb in my kitchen burned out, and I decided to replace it. I climbed up on a chair, unscrewed the old bulb, and grabbed a new one. As I twisted the new bulb into the socket, it slipped out of my hand and shattered on the counter below. Startled, I lost my balance and fell off the chair, landing on my backside. To make matters worse, I had to clean up 1,000,000 tiny shards of glass while sitting on the floor, sore and humiliated. Now, I invest in those long-lasting LED bulbs. The less often I have to replace them, the better for me and my dignity. Story 40. I never thought a stapler could betray me, but it did. I was at work, preparing for a big presentation, and I needed to staple a thick stack of papers together. The stapler resisted, so I pressed down harder. That's when it snapped back with enough force to staple 2 of my fingers together. The pain was instant, and I let out a yelp that drew the attention of everyone in the office. A coworker had to help me pry the staples out while trying not to laugh too hard. The worst part? I still had to finish assembling the presentation with 2 bandaged fingers. Now, I treat staplers with the same respect I'd give a wild animal. You never know when they'll decide to attack. Story 41. I never thought a dishwasher could turn against me, but it happened. One evening, I loaded the dishwasher, added detergent, and hit start like usual. About 10 minutes later, I noticed something was off. Foam, tons of it, was pouring out of the dishwasher and spreading across the kitchen floor. In my infinite wisdom, I had used regular dish soap instead of dishwasher detergent. Panicked, I grabbed a mop and tried to contain the sudsy chaos, but the foam kept multiplying like it had a life of its own. By the time I managed to turn off the machine, my kitchen looked like a scene from a slapstick comedy. It took hours to clean up, and the smell of lavender soap haunted me for days. Now, I triple-check the detergent before every load. Dish soap and dishwashers? Not a match made in heaven. Story 42. One time, I learned that even seemingly harmless chairs can be dangerous. I was at a friend's housewarming party, sitting on one of those cheap folding chairs. Everything was fine until I shifted my weight slightly to grab a drink. The chair's back leg buckled under me, and I crashed to the floor in front of everyone. To make matters worse, I somehow managed to knock over a plate of chips and dip on my way down. My friends tried to hold in their laughter, but it was impossible. I walked away with a bruised elbow, a sore tailbone, and the nickname Chair Slayer. Now, I test folding chairs before sitting on them. Better safe than humiliated. Story 43. I had no idea that vacuum cleaners could be so treacherous until one nearly took me out. I was vacuuming my living room, feeling proud of my productive streak, when the vacuum cord decided to stage a rebellion. As I stepped backward, my foot caught on the cord, and I went down like a felled tree. The vacuum, still running, tipped over and started chewing up the edge of my rug. By the time I scrambled to turn it off, I had rug fibers stuck in the vacuum and a new carpet design that looked like a bite mark. Now, I'm extra careful about where the cord is when I vacuum. It's not just a cleaning tool. It's a trap waiting to happen. Story 44. Once I found out the hard way that baking can be a full-contact sport. I decided to make cookies from scratch, feeling ambitious and ready to channel my inner chef. Everything was going smoothly until I tried to mix the dough. The electric mixer had other plans. As I turned it on, the mixer snagged on a stubborn clump of butter and spun out of control. Dough flew everywhere, on the walls, the floor, even my ceiling. To make matters worse, the beaters got tangled in the cord, and the entire mixer toppled off the counter. I ended up with a ruined batch of cookies and a kitchen that looked like it had been hit by a flour bomb. Now, I stick to store-bought cookie dough. It's not as impressive, but at least it doesn't attack me. Story 45. Have you ever been betrayed by your own backpack? Because I have. I was walking home from class one day, carrying a bag stuffed with books and a water bottle. Halfway down the street, I heard a strange ripping sound. Before I could react, the bottom of my backpack gave out and everything spilled onto the sidewalk. Books, pens, my laptop, everything scattered like a yard sale. The worst part? The water bottle popped open and soaked my notes. I spent the next 10 minutes scrambling to collect my things while passers-by gave me sympathetic looks. Now, I invest in sturdy backpacks and double-check the seams before loading them up. Trusting a flimsy bag? Never again. Story 46. I once learned the hard way that microwaves are not as foolproof as they seem. It was late and I was starving, so I decided to reheat some leftover pasta. Instead of transferring it to a microwave-safe dish, I left it in the aluminum takeout container. You probably already know where this is going. The second I hit start, sparks started flying inside the microwave like it was the 4th of July. Panicking, I rushed to turn it off, but not before the smell of burning plastic filled the kitchen. To make matters worse, the container had melted slightly, fusing with my pasta. Dinner was ruined, and so was my microwave. Now, I'm very careful about what goes into the microwave. Aluminum? Never again. Lesson learned. When in doubt, read the labels. Story 47. Once I had a run-in with a seemingly innocent set of blinds. It was a sunny morning, and I decided to open the blinds in my bedroom. The cord was tangled, so I gave it a good yank, thinking it would untangle itself. Big mistake. The entire rod holding the blinds came loose and fell, smacking me square on the head. I stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp in the process. By the time I regained my senses, I was surrounded by broken plastic slats and the remnants of my dignity. Now, I handle blinds with the care of a bomb squad technician. One wrong move, and you're in for a world of pain. Story 48. I thought setting up a hammock would be a relaxing activity. Turns out it's a death trap waiting to happen. One summer, I decided to hang a hammock between 2 trees in my backyard. It seemed secure, so I climbed in with a book, ready to enjoy some peace and quiet. The moment I shifted my weight, the rope snapped, and I crashed to the ground like a sack of potatoes. Worse, one of the trees wasn't as sturdy as it looked. It tipped slightly, dropping a small branch right onto my stomach. I spent the rest of the day nursing my bruises and rethinking my life choices. Now, I stick to lounge chairs. They may not swing, but at least they won't dump you onto the ground. Story 49. I'll never underestimate the danger of a bottle of soda again. It was a hot day, and I grabbed a bottle of cola from the fridge. It must have been shaken at some point, but I didn't realize that until I opened it. The cap shot off like a rocket, and soda exploded everywhere. My shirt, the counter, and even the ceiling were drenched in sticky cola. To make matters worse, the bottle slipped out of my hands and hit the floor, spraying even more soda in every direction. It took me an hour to clean up the mess, and my kitchen floor was sticky for days. Now, I open soda bottles with extreme caution, like they're grenades about to go off. Story 50. One time, I almost got taken out by a rogue umbrella. It was a windy day, and I was walking downtown with an oversized umbrella, trying to stay dry. Suddenly, a huge gust of wind caught the umbrella and flipped it inside out. Before I could react, the wind yanked the umbrella out of my hands and sent it tumbling down the street. I chased after it like a maniac, dodging traffic and trying not to slip on the wet pavement. When I finally caught up to it, the umbrella was completely destroyed, and I was soaking wet. Now, I invest in windproof umbrellas, or just accept that I'm going to get wet. Sometimes, it's better to let the weather win. Story 51. I once underestimated how dangerous candles could be. It was a cozy evening, and I decided to light a couple of candles to set the mood while watching a movie. I placed them on the coffee table, lit them, and got comfy. Halfway through the movie, I stretched my legs and accidentally knocked one of the candles over. The hot wax spilled onto the carpet and immediately caught a nearby magazine on fire. Panicking, I grabbed the first thing I could find, a throw pillow, and tried to smother the flames. Instead, I managed to spread the wax and embers, leaving scorch marks all over the carpet. By the time I got the fire out, my living room looked like the aftermath of a failed magic trick. Now, I stick to LED candles. The ambience might not be the same, but at least they won't burn my house down. Story 52. I never thought a mirror could betray me until one did. It was a lazy Sunday morning, and I was rearranging furniture in my bedroom. I had a full-length mirror leaning against the wall, and I decided to move it to a better spot. As I picked it up, the mirror slipped from my hands and tipped forward. In my panic to catch it, I ended up pulling it toward me. The frame hit me square in the shin, and the mirror cracked, leaving a spider web of broken glass. To make matters worse, I managed to cut my finger while trying to clean up the shards. Now every time I move a mirror, I treat it like a ticking time bomb. 7 years of bad luck? I'm not taking any chances. Story 53. One time, I had a close call with a sewing machine. I was hemming a pair of jeans, feeling pretty proud of my DIY skills, when the fabric jammed. Thinking I could fix it quickly, I reached under the needle to adjust the fabric. Big mistake. My foot accidentally pressed the pedal, and the needle went straight through my thumbnail. The pain was instant and excruciating. I managed to yank my hand away, but not without letting out a scream loud enough to scare my cat. After an embarrassing trip to urgent care, I retired from sewing indefinitely. These days, I stick to iron-on patches and avoid sewing machines like the plague. Story 54. I once got into a literal fight with a jar of pickles. It was dinner time, and I was craving a sandwich with pickles. I grabbed the jar from the fridge and twisted the lid with all my strength. Nothing. I tried running it under hot water, hitting the lid with a spoon, and even using a rubber grip, but the jar wouldn't budge. Frustrated, I decided to give it one last try. I twisted the lid as hard as I could, and it finally popped open, sending pickle juice flying all over me. My shirt, the counter, and even my face were soaked. To add insult to injury, the smell of vinegar lingered for hours. Now, I approach pickle jars like they're a boss fight in a video game. Sometimes you just have to know when to ask for backup. Story 55. I never thought an escalator could ruin my day, but it did. I was at the mall, juggling shopping bags and a drink, when I stepped onto the escalator. Halfway down, one of my shoelaces got caught in the edge of the step. At first, I thought I could just yank it free, but the escalator kept pulling it tighter. Panicking, I crouched down to untie my shoe while the escalator moved closer to the bottom. I managed to get my foot out just in time, but my shoe was shredded in the mechanism. I had to walk through the mall in one sock, enduring stares from strangers and giggles from a group of teenagers. Now, I double knot my laces every time I see an escalator. Better safe and fully shoed than sorry. Story 56. One time, I underestimated how dangerous a ladder could be. I was hanging up holiday lights on my porch, determined to outdo the neighbors. I set up the ladder, climbed up confidently, and got to work. Everything was fine until I leaned just a little too far to the left to reach the last hook. The ladder wobbled, and before I knew it, I was airborne. I landed in a pile of snow, which cushioned the fall but also completely soaked me. The worst part? A group of kids walking by saw the whole thing and applauded like it was a circus act. Now, I always ask for help with ladder work. My pride may have taken a hit, but at least my lights are straight, and I stay on solid ground. Story 57. I once had a showdown with a rogue drawer. I was organizing my kitchen, trying to Marie Kondo my way to happiness, when I noticed the utensil drawer wasn't sliding out properly. It seemed stuck, so I gave it a hard tug. Big mistake. The entire drawer flew out of the cabinet, spilling forks, knives, and random kitchen gadgets onto the floor. And my feet. One particularly sharp knife grazed my toe, leaving me hopping around in pain. The racket brought my roommate running, only for them to laugh hysterically at the mess. Now, I handle stubborn drawers with care and never underestimate the chaos they can unleash. Sometimes, organization comes at a price. Profitiate. One day, I learned that sprinklers are not my friends. It was a warm summer morning, and I decided to mow the lawn. Halfway through, I accidentally bumped into the sprinkler system control box. Apparently, the jolt was enough to turn it on. Suddenly, the sprinkler sprang to life, drenching me and the freshly cut grass. Panicked, I ran toward the control box to turn it off, but slipped on the wet grass and landed face first in the mud. By the time I got the sprinkler shut off, I was soaked, muddy, and thoroughly humiliated. Now, I steer clear of the sprinkler system whenever I mow. It's not just about avoiding a shower. It's about preserving what little dignity I have left. Story 59. I never thought a treadmill would turn against me, but it did. I was at the gym, feeling ambitious, and decided to try a high-speed run. I set the treadmill to a pace I had no business attempting and started sprinting. About 30 seconds in, I lost my footing. The treadmill belt launched me backward, and I landed on the floor in a heap. The sound of my fall was loud enough to make everyone in the gym turn and stare. To make matters worse, the treadmill was still running, spinning my water bottle off the holder and onto the floor. Now, I stick to a moderate pace. The gym is embarrassing enough without adding a personal highlight reel of failures. Story 60. I once had a not-so-great encounter with a sliding glass door. It was at a friend's party, and I was carrying a tray of drinks outside. Someone had closed the sliding door without me noticing. Thinking it was open, I walked straight into it, smacking my face against the glass. The tray tilted, and drinks spilled everywhere, including on me. The noise was enough to stop all conversation at the party, and when I turned around, everyone was staring. My friend rushed over to help clean up, but not before snapping a picture for memories. Now, I always double-check for clear barriers. Glass doors? More like glass traps. Story 61. I never thought a can of soup could betray me, but it did. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when I reached for the can opener. It was one of those manual ones, and I was in a hurry, so I didn't position it correctly. As I cranked the handle, the can slipped, and the jagged lid sliced my finger. Blood dripped onto the counter while I panicked, trying to stop the bleeding with a paper towel. To make matters worse, I knocked the open can over, spilling soup everywhere. My attempt to make a quick dinner turned into a crime scene. Now, I've upgraded to an electric can opener and treat every can like it's armed and dangerous. Sometimes convenience is worth the extra cost. Story 62. One time, I had a near-death experience with a swing. I was at the park with friends, reliving childhood memories, when someone dared me to see how high I could go. Feeling adventurous, I pumped my legs hard, soaring higher with each swing. But when I tried to slow down, the chains jerked and I lost my grip. I flew off the swing, landing flat on my back in the mulch. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and I just lay there, staring at the sky, wondering if I'd ever breathe again. My friends? They were too busy laughing to help. Now I stick to watching swings from a safe distance. Nostalgia is great, but not when it comes with bruised ribs. Story 63. I once underestimated the danger of Velcro shoes. It was a rainy day, and I decided to wear an old pair of Velcro sneakers for a quick errand. As I stepped outside, the rain soaked the straps, making them loosen with every step. By the time I reached the end of my driveway, one shoe completely came off. I tried to put it back on, but the wet Velcro wouldn't stick. I ended up walking back inside barefoot, slipping twice on the wet pavement for good measure. Now, I leave the Velcro shoes in the closet where they belong. Some things are best left in childhood. Story 64. I'll never look at an air mattress the same way again. One weekend, I was staying at a friend's house and offered to sleep on their inflatable mattress. It seemed fine at first, but halfway through the night, I woke up feeling like I was lying on concrete. The mattress had deflated, leaving me sprawled on the hardwood floor. Worse, the built-in pump was broken, so there was no way to refill it. I spent the rest of the night trying to fold myself into a comfortable position, using the limp mattress as a sad excuse for padding. Now, I always bring a sleeping bag to overnight stays. Air mattresses might look inviting, but they can't be trusted. Story 65. I never expected a ceiling fan to turn on me, but it happened. I was trying to dust the blades, standing on a chair with a rag in hand. I figured it would be a quick job, so I didn't bother turning the fan off. As I reached up to clean the first blade, I accidentally hit the fan switch with my elbow. The blade started spinning, smacking the rag out of my hand and spraying dust everywhere. Startled, I lost my balance and nearly toppled off the chair. By the time I climbed down, I was covered in dust and more annoyed than ever. Now, I always turn off the fan before cleaning it. Lesson learned. Ceiling fans are sneaky and should never be underestimated. Story 66. I learned the hard way that trash bags can be deceptively dangerous. It was a Sunday evening, and I was taking out the garbage after a big cleaning spree. The bag was overstuffed with sharp objects, broken glass, some old utensils, and even a bent coat hanger. As I was lifting the bag, it tore open at the bottom. Everything spilled out, including a shard of glass that nicked my leg on its way down. Panicked, I dropped the rest of the bag and stepped backward, only to trip over another pile of garbage I hadn't noticed. I ended up sitting on the driveway with a bleeding leg, surrounded by trash, and cursing my life choices. Now, I double bag anything sharp and never overload the garbage. Trash might seem harmless, but it's not worth the injury or the embarrassment. Story 67. I once had a literal run-in with a glass table. It was at a friend's housewarming party, and I was deep in conversation while holding a plate of snacks. Not paying attention, I turned to walk to the kitchen and smacked right into the edge of their clear, glass coffee table. The plate of snacks flew out of my hand, landing in a messy pile on the floor. Meanwhile, I hit my knee so hard that I almost toppled over. The room went silent for a moment before someone asked, "Are you okay?" I laughed it off, but my knee throbbed for days. Now, I'm extra cautious around glass furniture. It might look sleek, but it's a hazard waiting to happen. Story 68. I never thought a hand sanitizer dispenser could cause me grief, but it did. I was at the mall, and they had one of those automatic dispensers near the entrance. I waved my hand under it, expecting a normal amount of sanitizer, but instead, it shot out like a geyser. The sanitizer splattered all over my shirt and pants, leaving me looking like I'd lost a fight with a bottle of glue. A nearby kid burst out laughing, and I had no choice but to retreat to the restroom to clean up. Now, I approach automatic dispensers with caution. They might be convenient, but they have a mind of their own. Story 69. One time, I had a close call with a roll of duct tape. I was fixing a loose cabinet hinge and thought duct tape would be a quick solution. As I tried to tear off a piece, the tape got stuck to itself, forming a tangled, sticky mess. Frustrated, I yanked at the roll, only for it to snap back and hit me in the forehead. The edge of the roll left a small cut, and I ended up with tape stuck to my hand, my shirt, and even my hair. By the time I freed myself, I'd forgotten all about the cabinet hinge. Now, I keep scissors nearby whenever I use duct tape. It's not just a tool, it's a weapon if you're not careful. Story 70. I once discovered that even umbrellas can be a menace. It was a rainy day, and I was rushing to catch a bus. My umbrella wouldn't open at first, so I gave it a hard shake. Unfortunately, the force of the shake made one of the metal spokes snap loose, and it poked me right in the hand. As I recoiled from the unexpected jab, the umbrella finally opened, but inside out. Rain poured down on me as I struggled to fix it, and by the time I got on the bus, I was soaked and sporting a small puncture wound. Now, I only buy high-quality umbrellas. They might cost more, but they won't turn a rainy day into a disaster.